London, 1854. The grand spires of St. George's Church reached toward the heavens on what should have been the most joyous day of Sophia Baskerville's life. The golden light of early autumn filtered through the stained glass windows, casting a kaleidoscope of colours across her ivory silk gown. The pews were filled with the cream of London society, titled Ladies with their feathered hats and gentlemen in their finest morning coats, all whispering in anticipation. Sophia stood at the entrance, her gloved hand trembling slightly on her father's arm. Lord William Baskerville, a respected member of Parliament and descendant of one of England's oldest families, gazed down at his daughter with unmistakable pride. "You are a vision, my dear," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "The Duke is a fortunate man indeed." A small smile graced Sophia's lips, though her stomach fluttered with nerves. 6 months had passed since Charles Norfolk, the most sought-after bachelor in London, had surprised everyone by proposing to her during the midwinter ball at Pembroke House. The memory still made her heart race, how he had led her to the moonlit terrace, dropped to one knee and promised her eternal devotion. "I shall love you until my dying breath, Miss Baskerville," he had vowed, his handsome face illuminated by moonlight. "You have brought light into my world of endless social obligations. Say you will be my Duchess." The orchestra began the wedding march, and Sophia took a deep breath. This was the moment she had dreamed of since she was a girl, to marry for love, not merely for advantage, as was common in their circle. She began her walk down the aisle, her eyes fixed on the altar where Charles should have been waiting. The first whispers reached her ears when she was halfway down the nave. "Where is the Duke? Has anyone seen Norfolk this morning? This is most irregular." Sophia faltered, her steps slowing as she reached the front of the church. The vicar stood alone, his expression a mixture of confusion and growing concern. The Duke's best man, Lord Haverford, approached her father, whispering urgently in his ear. The minutes stretched painfully as the congregation's murmurs grew louder. Lord Baskerville's face hardened into a mask of controlled fury as he turned to Sophia. "My child," he said quietly, "it appears the Duke is indisposed." The blood drained from Sophia's face as the terrible truth dawned on her. Charles was not coming. There would be no wedding today. In the front pew, the Dowager Duchess of Norfolk, Charles's formidable mother, rose with glacial dignity. "This is outrageous," she declared, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "My son would never—" Her words were cut short by the arrival of a breathless footman who handed Lord Haverford a sealed note. The man's face fell as he read it, and when he looked up at Sophia, his expression was one of genuine pity. "Miss Baskerville," he said, bowing stiffly, "the Duke sends his regrets. He finds himself unable to proceed with the ceremony." A collective gasp rippled through the church. Sophia stood frozen, her bouquet of white roses and lilies hanging limply from her trembling fingers. The humiliation burned like fire in her veins, worse than any physical pain she had ever known. "Take me home," she whispered to her father. "Please, father, take me home." As Lord Baskerville led his daughter back down the aisle, the whispers followed them like shadows. Poor dear girl. What could have possessed Norfolk? Her reputation will never recover. Among the sea of pitying and curious faces, one pair of eyes watched with particular intensity. From his position near the back of the church, Ralph Percy, the Duke of Northumberland, observed the unfolding disaster with a mixture of disgust and unexpected sympathy. Known for his avoidance of matrimony and society's endless matchmaking schemes, Ralph had attended only out of obligation to his late father's friendship with the Baskervilles. Now, as he watched Sophia walk past with her head held high despite the tears streaming down her pale cheeks, something stirred within him, a feeling of admiration for her dignity in the face of such cruel humiliation. "Despicable," he muttered to himself, "utterly despicable." His companion, Lord James Blackwood, nodded in agreement. Norfolk always was a scoundrel beneath that charming exterior. Poor Miss Baskerville. Her season is effectively over. No one will speak of anything else for months. Ralph's eyes narrowed as he watched Sophia disappear through the church doors. "She deserves better than this farce," he said, more to himself than to James. Far better. Little did he know how prophetic those words would prove to be. The weeks following the wedding disaster were a blur of pain and isolation for Sophia. Confined to her family's townhouse on Berkeley Square, she retreated into herself, refusing all visitors save her dearest friend, Elizabeth Caldwell. "You cannot hide forever, Sophia," Elizabeth insisted one grey afternoon as they sat in the drawing-room. "The gossip will eventually die down if you face it with your head high." Sophia gazed out at the rain-soaked gardens. "You did not see their faces, Lizzie. The pity, the morbid curiosity, even satisfaction from those whose daughters had been passed over by Charles." She spoke his name with difficulty, as if the very sound of it caused her pain. "Then show them you are not defeated," Elizabeth urged, taking her friend's cold hands. "The Harrington ball is next week. Come with me. Show society that Sophia Baskerville is more than a jilted bride." The mere thought made Sophia's stomach clench with anxiety, but she recognized the wisdom in her friend's words. She could not hide forever. "Perhaps you are right," she conceded. "Though I shall need a new gown, I refuse to wear anything he ever complimented." Elizabeth smiled. "That's my brave girl. We shall visit Madame Laurent tomorrow." Meanwhile, across London at White's Gentlemen's Club, Ralph Percy sat in a leather armchair, a glass of brandy in his hand, as he half listened to the conversation flowing around him. "I heard Norfolk has fled to his estate in Yorkshire," Lord Haverford was saying. "Apparently he wrote to his mother claiming a sudden crisis of conscience. Said he realized he could not make Miss Baskerville happy." "Conscience?" Ralph scoffed, breaking his silence. "The man doesn't possess such a thing. More likely he found a wealthier prospect, or tired of the chase once she accepted his proposal." The men exchanged uncomfortable glances. Ralph Percy was not known for strong opinions on matters of romance or society scandals. His sudden interest caught them off guard. "You seem unusually concerned with this affair, Northumberland," observed Lord Blackwood with curiosity. "I don't recall you ever taking much interest in Norfolk before." Ralph swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "I despise cowardice, that's all. If a man gives his word, he should honor it. Norfolk has dishonored himself and needlessly destroyed a young woman's reputation in the process." The conversation shifted to politics and hunting, but Ralph remained distracted. The image of Sophia Baskerville's dignified exit from the church haunted him. In that moment of terrible vulnerability, he had glimpsed something rare in London society, genuine emotion amid the carefully constructed facades of propriety. It intrigued him more than he cared to admit. The Harrington ball was in full swing when Sophia entered on her father's arm. The grand ballroom of Harrington House glowed with the light of 1,000 candles, illuminating the cream of London society in their finery. For a heartbeat, the music seemed to falter, and heads turned as whispers rippled through the crowd. "There she is! The jilted Baskerville girl! How brave to show her face so soon!" Sophia felt her resolve waver, but then straightened her spine, lifting her chin slightly. She wore a gown of deep sapphire blue. A bold choice that Madame Laurent had assured her brought out the striking color of her grey-blue eyes and complemented her chestnut hair. It was a departure from the pastels expected of young ladies, but Sophia was no longer concerned with meeting society's expectations. "Remember, you are a Baskerville," her father murmured. "We do not bend. We do not break." They made their way through the crowd, acknowledging acquaintances with polite nods. Some turned away awkwardly, but others, particularly the older matrons who had weathered their own scandals in years past, greeted her with genuine warmth. Lady Harrington, their hostess, took both of Sophia's hands in hers. "My dear Miss Baskerville, how delightful to see you. You look absolutely radiant this evening." "Thank you for your kindness, Lady Harrington," Sophia replied, grateful for the woman's tact. Across the ballroom, Ralph Percy stood with his usual air of detached boredom, half listening to a discussion about the Crimean conflict. The arrival of Sophia Baskerville, however, commanded his full attention. He had expected her to remain in seclusion for months, yet here she was, facing the very society that had witnessed her humiliation. "I must say, Miss Baskerville shows remarkable courage," observed Lord James Blackwood, following Ralph's gaze. "Most young ladies would have retreated to the country indefinitely after such an incident." Ralph nodded, studying her from a distance. The sapphire gown was a statement in itself, not the attire of a woman defeated by scandal, but one determined to define herself on her own terms. "Perhaps Norfolk did her a favor," Ralph murmured. "She appears far too interesting for such a shallow fool." James raised an eyebrow. "My word, Percy, I do believe you're developing an admiration for the lady. Should I alert the matchmaking mammas that the notorious bachelor Duke of Northumberland has finally shown interest in a prospect?" Ralph shot his friend a warning glance. "Don't be absurd. I merely respect resilience when I see it." The evening progressed, and Sophia found herself surrounded by a protective circle of friends. Elizabeth hovered nearby, deflecting intrusive questions with practiced grace. Even Lord Blackwood, whom Sophia knew only by reputation, approached to engage her father in conversation, providing a welcome distraction from the curious stares. When the orchestra began a waltz, the dance floor cleared as couples formed. Sophia prepared to retreat to the sidelines, having no expectation of being asked to dance. "Miss Baskerville," the deep voice startled her. She turned to find the Duke of Northumberland standing before her, tall and imposing in his immaculate evening clothes. Unlike most of the gentlemen present, who affected an almost feminine delicacy in their attire, Ralph Percy's appearance was one of austere elegance, his clothes impeccably tailored but without ostentation. "Your Grace," she replied with a curtsy, surprised by his approach. She knew him by reputation, wealthy, intelligent, and notoriously disinterested in marriage. They had been introduced once at a literary salon, but had exchanged barely more than pleasantries. "Would you honor me with this dance?" he asked, his expression serious, almost severe. His eyes, a striking shade of green that contrasted sharply with his dark hair, held hers steadily. The ballroom seemed to hold its collective breath. For the Duke of Northumberland to single out the jilted Miss Baskerville for a waltz was unexpected, to say the least. "I would be delighted, Your Grace," she answered, taking his offered hand. As they moved onto the dance floor, Sophia was acutely aware of the whispers following them. Ralph's hand at her waist was firm, but respectful, his movements assured as he guided her through the waltz. "You dance well, Miss Baskerville," he observed, "as do you, Your Grace, though I confess I'm somewhat surprised by your invitation. You're not known for your enthusiasm for dancing." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "I dance when the partner interests me. And what makes me interesting, Your Grace? My recent notoriety, perhaps?" There was a sharp edge to her question. Ralph's eyes narrowed slightly. "No, Miss Baskerville. Your dignity despite it." The directness of his response caught her off guard. Most gentlemen would have offered empty platitudes or awkward sympathy. "Forgive me," she said softly. "That was ungracious. No apology needed. You have every right to be wary." He guided her through a turn with effortless grace. "London society can be merciless, particularly to those who least deserve its cruelty. You speak as though you've experienced such cruelty yourself, Your Grace." A shadow passed across his features. "Let's just say I understand what it is to be the subject of speculation and judgment." They danced in silence for several moments, moving in perfect harmony despite never having partnered before. Sophia found herself relaxing into the dance, appreciating the solid presence of the Duke, so different from Charles's flashy charm. "May I speak plainly, Miss Baskerville?" Ralph asked as the waltz neared its conclusion. "I would prefer it, Your Grace. Norfolk is a fool who didn't deserve your hand. You have conducted yourself with remarkable grace in the face of unwarranted humiliation. And while I have no doubt you'll receive numerous invitations to dance after this evening, I would be honored if you would save the supper dance for me." Sophia studied his face, searching for signs of pity or, worse, the predatory interest she'd detected in some gentleman who clearly viewed her as damaged goods and therefore an easy conquest. She found neither, only a straightforward respect that was refreshingly honest. "The supper dance is yours, Your Grace," she said as the music ended. As Ralph escorted her back to Elizabeth and her father, the whispers around them took on a different tone. By tomorrow, all of London would be talking not of Sophia Baskerville's humiliation, but of her apparent conquest of the elusive Duke of Northumberland. Neither Sophia nor Ralph paid them any mind. True to Sophia's prediction, her dance with the Duke became the talk of London. Over the following weeks, she gradually re-entered society, finding that Ralph Percy's apparent interest had transformed her from an object of pity to one of fascination. They encountered each other regularly at soirées, literary discussions, and gallery openings. Unlike Charles, who had overwhelmed her with flamboyant gestures and public declarations, Ralph's attention was subtle but consistent. He sought her out for conversations about books she had mentioned enjoying, remembered her opinions on matters ranging from poetry to politics, and seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts. "He's quite taken with you," Elizabeth observed one afternoon as they browsed in Hatchard's bookshop. "The Duke, I mean." Sophia ran her fingers along the spine of a volume of Tennyson's poems. "I think he merely feels sorry for me, Lizzie." "Nonsense. Ralph Percy doesn't do anything out of mere pity. He's far too practical for such sentimentality." Elizabeth lowered her voice. "They say he swore off marriage after some tragedy in his youth. No one knows the details, but his mother was American, a Boston heiress, and there are whispers about a scandal involving her family." "Gossip, nothing more," Sophia replied, though her curiosity was piqued. "Besides, I have no interest in marriage. Once was enough." "You weren't actually married, dear." "No, but I was close enough to see the abyss," Sophia said with forced lightness. "I prefer my independence." Yet later that week, when Ralph invited her to ride with him in Hyde Park, properly chaperoned, of course, she accepted without hesitation. Something about his company made her feel both challenged and at ease, a paradoxical combination that intrigued her more than she cared to admit. They rode side by side, Sophia's lady's maid following at a discreet distance. The autumn air was crisp, and the park was alive with colour as the leaves began to turn. "You ride exceptionally well," Ralph commented, admiring her confident seat and control of her spirited mare. "My father believes women should be accomplished in more than just watercolours and the pianoforte," she replied. "He taught me himself when I was just a girl. A progressive viewpoint. I share it." He glanced at her profile. "My mother was an excellent horsewoman. She said it gave her freedom when society offered few other forms of it to women." Sophia's interest was piqued by this rare mention of his family. "Your mother sounds like she was a remarkable woman." A shadow crossed his face. "She was. She died when I was 15, consumption. My father followed 3 years later. I sometimes think it was from grief as much as illness." "I'm sorry," Sophia said softly. "My own mother passed when I was 12. It changes you, doesn't it? To lose a parent so young." Ralph nodded, understanding passing between them. "It forces one to grow up rather quickly." They rode in companionable silence for a while, the rhythm of the horses' hooves a soothing backdrop to their thoughts. "Miss Baskerville," Ralph said eventually, "would you and your father do me the honour of dining at Northumberland House tomorrow evening? A small gathering, just a few friends and relations. My aunt, Lady Eleanor, is visiting from Bath and has expressed a wish to meet you." The invitation was significant. A private dinner at his home, with family present, represented a more serious interest than their public encounters thus far. "We would be delighted, Your Grace," Sophia replied, her heart beating a little faster despite her determination to guard it. What neither of them noticed was the solitary rider watching them from a grove of trees nearby, a man whose handsome features were marred by a scowl of displeasure. Charles Norfolk had returned to London, and he was not pleased by what he found. Northumberland House stood as one of London's last great aristocratic town palaces, its grand facade overlooking the Thames at Charing Cross. As Sophia and her father were ushered through its imposing entrance hall, she couldn't help but compare it to the Norfolk residence she had once expected to call home. Where the latter had been ostentatious in its displays of wealth, Ralph's ancestral home possessed a dignified elegance that spoke of centuries of quiet power. The small dinner party was already assembled in the drawing room, a carefully selected group that included Lord James Blackwood and his wife, a renowned historian from Oxford, Ralph's elderly aunt, Lady Eleanor, and a few other distinguished guests. Sophia noted with relief that there was not a single notorious gossip among them. Ralph came forward to greet them, looking more relaxed than she had ever seen him in the familiar surroundings of his own home. "Miss Baskerville, Lord Baskerville, welcome to Northumberland House," he said, his usually stern features softening into a genuine smile. Lady Eleanor Percy, a diminutive woman with shrewd eyes that missed nothing, approached with the aid of an ebony cane. "So this is the young lady who has managed to lure my nephew out of his self-imposed isolation," she declared, examining Sophia with undisguised curiosity. "Aunt Eleanor, please," Ralph murmured, a hint of embarrassment colouring his tone. "Nonsense, boy. At my age one hasn't time for social niceties." She turned back to Sophia. "He's been positively hermit-like these past years, buried in his books and business affairs, shunning every eligible young lady. Most unlike his father, Henry was the most sought-after bachelor of his day before he met Ralph's mother." "It's a pleasure to meet you, Lady Eleanor," Sophia replied, charmed by the old woman's forthright manner. though I should clarify that His Grace and I are merely friends." Lady Eleanor said, clearly unconvinced. "Well, come sit by me at dinner, my dear. I want to hear all about your interests. Ralph mentioned you're quite the reader." The evening progressed pleasantly, with conversation flowing easily across topics from literature and art to the ongoing war in Crimea. Sophia found herself seated between Lady Eleanor and the Oxford historian, engaging in a lively discussion about the poetry of Elizabeth Barrett Browning. From his position at the head of the table, Ralph observed Sophia with growing admiration. She held her own in every conversation, her intelligence and wit shining through without artifice. Unlike so many society women who simpered and agreed with whatever opinion was expressed by the highest-ranking gentleman present, Sophia spoke her mind with refreshing honesty. "Your Miss Baskerville is quite the scholar," Lady Eleanor commented later, as the ladies withdrew to the drawing-room, leaving the gentlemen to their port. "And she has spirit, a necessary quality for a Percy bride." "Aunt Eleanor," Ralph warned, "you're getting ahead of yourself. Miss Baskerville has only recently endured a significant disappointment. She needs friendship, not premature speculation about her future." Lady Eleanor patted his hand. "Nephew, at my age, one develops an instinct for these matters. That young lady is precisely what you need. Someone who challenges you, who doesn't worship at the altar of your dukedom." Ralph couldn't entirely disagree, though he was reluctant to admit it even to himself. Over the past weeks, Sophia had become increasingly important to him. He found himself seeking her company, valuing her opinions, admiring her resilience. Yet he hesitated to name the growing feeling as anything more than respect and friendship. After all, she had been publicly abandoned by the man she loved. Her heart was surely still engaged elsewhere, whatever brave face she presented to the world. The following week brought the first snow of the season, blanketing London in pristine white. Sophia stood at the window of her father's study, watching the snowflakes swirl in the lamplight, when the butler announced an unexpected visitor. "The Duke of Norfolk, my lord, my lady." Sophia froze, her hands gripping the windowsill as she turned slowly to face the door. Charles Norfolk strode into the room with the same easy confidence she remembered, as though the past months of pain and scandal had never happened. He was as handsome as ever in his fashionable attire, golden hair gleaming in the firelight. "Miss Baskerville, Lord Baskerville," he said, bowing slightly. "I thank you for receiving me." Lord Baskerville's face was like stone. "I received you only to inform you personally that you are no longer welcome in this house, Norfolk. Your actions toward my daughter were unconscionable." Charles had the grace to look discomfited. "That is precisely why I have come, sir, to make amends, to explain." "There can be no explanation sufficient for abandoning a lady at the altar," Lord Baskerville said coldly. "Father," Sophia interrupted, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I would hear what the Duke has to say." After a moment's hesitation, Lord Baskerville nodded stiffly. "Very well, you have 5 minutes, Norfolk, then I must ask you to leave." Charles approached Sophia, his blue eyes filled with apparent remorse. "Sophia, Miss Baskerville, I cannot begin to express my regret for the pain I caused you. My actions were inexcusable." "Yes, they were," she agreed calmly. "Why have you returned, Your Grace?" He seemed taken aback by her composure. Perhaps he had expected tears, hysteria, or even joy at his return. Instead, she regarded him with the cool detachment one might show a stranger. "I've come to explain myself, and to ask, hope, really, that you might find it in your heart to forgive me." He glanced at Lord Baskerville, then back to Sophia. "Might we speak privately?" "Absolutely not," her father declared. "It's all right, father," Sophia said. "We can speak in the drawing-room. The door shall remain open." In the drawing-room, Charles paced before the fireplace, while Sophia sat rigidly on a settee, maintaining as much distance between them as propriety allowed. "I was a coward," he began. "The night before our wedding I was overcome with a terrible fear, not of you, never of you, but of failing as a husband. My father, as you know, was not a faithful man. My mother suffered greatly because of it. I began to fear I might inherit his worst qualities." "So you decided to spare me by publicly humiliating me?" Sophia asked, her voice cool. "How noble." Charles winced. "I deserve your anger. What I did was unforgivable. But Sophia, being away from you these months, has shown me what a terrible mistake I made. I've never ceased loving you." "How convenient that you've realized this just as I've begun to rebuild my life," she observed. "I assume you've heard of my friendship with the Duke of Northumberland?" A flash of something, jealousy, irritation, crossed Charles's face before he masked it. "I have. People talk of little else." "But surely you cannot be serious about Percy. He's known to be cold, antisocial, nothing like the man who could make you happy. And you presume to know what would make me happy after abandoning me on what should have been the happiest day of my life?" Sophia rose, anger finally breaking through her calm facade. "Your Grace, you forfeited any right to an opinion on my happiness when you failed to appear at St. George's." "Sophia, please." Charles moved closer, his voice dropping to the persuasive tone she once found irresistible. "What we had was real. I made a terrible mistake, but we can begin again. I still love you. I believe you still love me too." For a moment, Sophia felt a flicker of her old feelings, the infatuation that had once consumed her, the dreams she had built around a future with Charles. But it was like looking at a faded portrait, the colors no longer vivid, the details blurred by time and pain. "No, Charles," she said, using his Christian name for the first and last time. "I don't love you anymore. Perhaps I never truly did. I was in love with the idea of you, the charming, devoted suitor who seemed to adore me. But that man never really existed, did he?" Charles stared at her, genuine surprise in his eyes. He had clearly expected her to fall gratefully into his arms, overjoyed at his return. "This is Percy's influence," he said, a harder edge entering his voice. "He's turned you against me." "Ralph, His Grace, has done nothing of the sort," Sophia replied. "He has simply shown me what true respect looks like. Now I think you should leave." Charles's handsome face hardened. "This isn't over, Sophia. Percy doesn't love you. He's incapable of it. Everyone knows he swore off marriage after his American mother's family scandal. He's merely using you to rehabilitate his own reputation as a recluse." "Leave, Your Grace," Sophia repeated, refusing to let his words affect her, "and please do not call again." As he departed, Sophia returned to the window, watching as Charles's carriage pulled away into the swirling snow. She felt oddly hollow, not devastated as she might once have expected, but unsettled by his accusations about Ralph. What did she really know about the Duke of Northumberland's past? Why had he really taken an interest in her? And most troubling of all, why did the thought that he might not truly care for her cause such an ache in her heart? The annual midwinter ball at Lady Catherine Howard's estate provided the perfect backdrop for the drama unfolding in London's high society. Held in her sprawling country house just outside London, it was the last major social event before many families departed for their country estates for Christmas. Sophia arrived with her father and Elizabeth, her nerves on edge. She had not seen Ralph since Charles's unexpected visit, having sent her apologies for a musical evening at Northumberland House, claiming a headache. In truth, she had needed time to sort through her confused feelings. The ballroom was transformed into a winter wonderland, with evergreen boughs and white flowers adorning every surface, crystal chandeliers casting a magical glow over the proceedings. Sophia wore a gown of deep burgundy velvet, another bold choice that set her apart from the pastel-clad debutantes. She spotted Ralph immediately upon entering, his tall figure impossible to miss as he conversed with Lord Blackwood. As if sensing her presence, he looked up, their eyes meeting across the crowded room. Something in his expression, relief perhaps, made her heart flutter. Before she could make her way to him, however, a familiar voice spoke from behind her. "You look ravishing in burgundy, Miss Baskerville, always so distinctive in your choices." Charles Norfolk stood there, resplendent in evening attire, a calculated smile on his handsome face. Though he addressed Sophia, his gaze was fixed on Ralph across the room, making his intentions clear. He wanted to be seen speaking with her. "Your Grace," she acknowledged coolly, "I'm surprised to see you here." "Lady Catherine is my godmother," he replied smoothly. "She insisted I attend. May I say how lovely you look this evening?" "You may not," Sophia replied, her patience wearing thin. "I believe I made my feelings clear during your call. Now, if you'll excuse me—" "One dance," Charles pressed, lowering his voice. "For old time's sake, surely you can grant me that small courtesy." "The lady appears disinclined to dance with you, Norfolk," came Ralph's deep voice as he approached. "I suggest you respect her wishes." Charles turned, his smile never wavering though his eyes hardened. "Percy, how good to see you again. I was just reminiscing with Miss Baskerville about happier times." "Indeed." Ralph's expression remained impassive, but Sophia noticed the tension in his jaw. "Miss Baskerville, I believe you promised me the first waltz." "I did," she agreed, grateful for his timely intervention. She placed her hand on his offered arm, turning away from Charles without another word. As Ralph led her to the dance floor, she whispered, "Thank you for the rescue." "No rescue necessary. You seem to be handling him admirably," he replied. "Though I confess I've been looking for an excuse to speak with you. You've been avoiding me this past week." The music began and they moved together in perfect harmony, as they had that first night at the Harrington ball. "I needed time to think," Sophia admitted. "Charles paid me a visit." Ralph's hand tightened slightly at her waist. "I see. Has he come to his senses and realized what a fool he was?" "Something like that. He claims to still love me, to want to begin again." She studied Ralph's face for his reaction. "And what did you tell him?" His voice was carefully neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. "That I no longer love him, that perhaps I never truly did." The waltz took them through a turn, bringing them momentarily closer together. "A wise assessment," Ralph said softly. "Is it? I'm beginning to wonder if I understand anything about love at all." Sophia gathered her courage. "Ralph, forgive me, Your Grace." "Ralph, please," he interrupted. "After all these weeks, I think we've earned the right to some informality, at least in private." "Ralph," she began again, the name unfamiliar but pleasing on her tongue, "what is this between us? You seek my company. You've introduced me to your family. You defend me against Charles. Yet I feel there's something you're holding back." The music swelled around them as Ralph guided her through another turn, his expression troubled. "You're right," he said finally. "There is something, a history that makes me as cautious." "Charles mentioned a scandal involving your mother's family," Sophia said hesitantly. "He implied it was why you avoid marriage." Ralph's face darkened. "Norfolk should be more careful with his insinuations." "Is it true?" He sighed. "Partially. My mother was indeed American, the daughter of a wealthy Boston merchant. My father scandalized his family by choosing her over the English heiress they had selected. But that's not why I've avoided matrimony." "Then why?" The waltz was ending, forcing them to pause their conversation as they joined in the applause for the orchestra. "Not here," Ralph said, glancing around at the curious eyes watching them. "Would you walk with me in the conservatory? Your friend Miss Caldwell can chaperone." Once in the relative privacy of Lady Catherine's magnificent conservatory, with Elizabeth discreetly lingering among the exotic plants within sight but out of earshot, Ralph and Sophia stopped beside a gurgling fountain surrounded by winter blooms. "My reluctance stems not from my mother's origins, but from what I witnessed in her marriage," Ralph began, his voice low. "My father loved her deeply, but the ton never fully accepted her. She was constantly scrutinized, her every word and action judged by impossible standards. The happiness they found together came at a great cost to her. She suffered for marrying into the aristocracy," Sophia said, understanding dawning. "Yes, and I swore I would never subject someone I cared for to such treatment." He turned to face her fully. "Then I saw you that day at St. George's walking back down the aisle with your head held high despite your broken heart, and I recognized something in you, a strength like hers." Sophia's heart quickened. "And that's why you approached me at the Harrington ball?" "Initially, yes. I admired your courage. I wanted to show those vultures that you had allies." A smile softened his features. "But then I came to know you, your mind, your spirit, your genuine goodness, and admiration became something far deeper." "Ralph," she whispered, hardly daring to believe what he seemed to be saying. "I care for you, Sophia," he said simply, "more than I've ever cared for anyone, but I've hesitated to speak because of your recent heartbreak, and because I feared you might still love Norfolk." "Ralph, I need to know, what do you want from me? You appear in my life, you show concern for my well-being, you disappear, then reappear. Do you truly care for me?" Ralph's expression softened in the dim light of the conservatory. For the first time, Sophia saw vulnerability in his usually composed features. "Sophia," he said, her name almost a caress on his lips, "the truth is that I have been fighting against my feelings for you since that first dance. I told myself it was merely concern, then friendship, then admiration, but I can no longer deny the truth, even to myself. He took her gloved hands in his touch gentle yet sure. What do I want from you? Nothing. And everything. I love you. I have loved you, I believe, since I saw your dignity in the face of humiliation. Everything I've learned about you since has only deepened that feeling. Sophia's breath caught in her throat. Then why keep your distance? Why the hesitation? Because I feared you could not possibly return my feelings so soon after Norfolk's betrayal. Because I did not wish to be merely a replacement, a consolation prize. His eyes searched hers. And because loving someone means wanting their happiness above all else, even if that happiness doesn't include me. Tears pricked at Sophia's eyes, not of sadness, but of a profound relief. All this time I thought perhaps you were merely being kind, or worse, pitying me. Never pity, Ralph said firmly. Admiration, respect, and yes, love, but never pity. Sophia felt as though a weight had been lifted from her heart. The doubts that had plagued her since Charles's visit melted away in the warmth of Ralph's honest declaration. I cannot say when it happened, she confessed. Perhaps it was when you discussed Wordsworth's poetry with me for hours at Lady Fleming's literary salon, or when you remembered that I preferred lilies to roses, or when you defended that factory girl's right to fair wages at Lord Pembroke's dinner, despite everyone else's dismissal. A smile touched Ralph's lips. You notice that? I notice everything about you, she admitted. You're nothing like what society claims. They call you cold. But I've seen the passion with which you fight for what's right. They say you're antisocial, but I've witnessed your kindness to those society overlooks. Only you see me so clearly, he murmured. And only you have seen me, truly seen me, as more than a pretty ornament or a tragic figure. Sophia's voice grew stronger with conviction. Ralph, I believe I love you too. Not as a refuge from heartbreak or a shield against scandal, but for yourself. The look of joy that transformed Ralph's usually solemn features was breathtaking. For a moment, they stood in silence, the significance of their declarations hanging in the air between them. May I call upon your father tomorrow? Ralph asked finally. To request his permission to court you properly? Yes, Sophia whispered. Though I warn you, he's grown quite protective since everything happened. As he should be, Ralph replied. I would expect no less. From across the conservatory, Elizabeth cleared her throat delicately, a reminder of her presence and the propriety they must maintain. We should return to the ballroom, Sophia said reluctantly. Ralph offered his arm. Lady Catherine will be serving supper soon. May I escort you? As they rejoined the festivities, Sophia was keenly aware of Charles watching them from across the room, his expression darkening when he observed their evident closeness. But for once she felt no lingering pain at the sight of him, only a mild pity for a man who had thrown away something precious out of cowardice. Her future, she realized with quiet certainty, lay with Ralph. The following weeks were among the happiest of Sophia's life. True to his word, Ralph called upon Lord Baskerville the day after the midwinter ball, formally requesting permission to court Sophia. Her father, initially cautious after the Norfolk debacle, was won over by Ralph's straightforward manner and evident sincerity. Their courtship progressed with a natural ease that surprised them both. Unlike the whirlwind romance with Charles, which had been conducted largely in the spotlight of society balls and public gatherings, Sophia and Ralph's relationship deepened through quiet afternoons in his extensive library, long rides in the park, and thoughtful conversations about everything from politics to poetry. Lady Eleanor, delighted by the match, became Sophia's devoted champion, regaling her with stories of Ralph's childhood and offering insights into the sometimes complex man he had become. He built walls around his heart after his mother died, the elderly woman confided during an afternoon tea at Northumberland House. His father retreated into grief, and Ralph shouldered the responsibilities of the dukedom far too young. He learned to hide his feelings behind that stern facade. His mother must have been an extraordinary woman, Sophia said softly. Lady Eleanor nodded. She was radiant, artistic, full of life. Some adored her, others merely tolerated her out of duty. She was a woman who left no one indifferent. And in our world, my dear, that often comes at a cost. I see glimpses of the boy he must have been sometimes, Sophia replied, smiling, when he's truly excited about a new book, or when he laughs at his own jokes. Lady Eleanor patted her hand approvingly. You're good for him, my dear. I haven't seen him this happy in years." Not everyone viewed their growing attachment with such approval, however. Charles Norfolk had begun appearing with suspicious frequency at events they attended, often making a point of engaging Sophia in conversation before Ralph could intervene. "He's becoming a nuisance," Elizabeth observed after one such encounter at a gallery opening. "The way he looks at you, it's as though he believes he still has some claim on your affections." "He's simply wounded in his pride," Sophia replied, though she too was growing concerned by Charles's persistence. "He expected me to welcome him back with open arms. The fact that I've moved on, and with Ralph of all people, is a blow to his vanity." "Be careful, Sophia," Elizabeth warned. "Men like Norfolk can be dangerous when their pride is wounded." Her friend's words proved prophetic. Just days later, as Sophia left her modiste's shop on Bond Street, she found Charles waiting beside her carriage. "A word, if you please, Miss Baskerville," he said, his charming smile firmly in place, though it didn't reach his eyes. "We have nothing to discuss, Your Grace," she replied coolly, signaling to her footman. Charles stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I wonder if Percy has told you the whole truth about his past, about why he really avoids marriage." Sophia stiffened. "Whatever you're implying, I'm not interested." "No? Not even if it concerns a former fiancé?" Charles's smile turned sly. "Ask him about Lady Isabella Montague. Ask why their engagement was broken just weeks before the wedding." Before Sophia could respond, her footman intervened, and Charles stepped back, bowing with mock politeness. "Good day, Miss Baskerville. Do give my regards to the Duke." Disturbed by the encounter, Sophia debated whether to mention it to Ralph. She trusted him implicitly, yet Charles's insinuation had planted a seed of doubt. Had there been another woman, another broken engagement? That evening, as they sat in the Baskerville drawing-room following dinner, her father dozing discreetly by the fire to provide the required chaperonage, Sophia found herself unable to focus on their discussion of an upcoming exhibition at the Royal Academy. "You're distracted tonight," Ralph observed, studying her with concern. "Is something troubling you?" Sophia hesitated, then decided that honesty had served them well thus far. "I encountered Charles today. He made some implications about your past." Ralph's expression darkened. "I see. What exactly did Norfolk say?" "He mentioned someone named Lady Isabella Montague. He implied there was a broken engagement." A tense silence fell between them. Ralph rose from his seat, walking to the window where he stood gazing out at the gaslit street, his back rigid. "Ralph?" Sophia's voice was soft, uncertain. When he turned back to her, his expression was pained. "I should have told you. I was going to tell you. I just wanted to find the right moment." "So it's true?" Sophia asked, her heart sinking. "Partially. There was an Isabella Montague. We were betrothed when I was 23, a match arranged by my father before his death." He returned to his seat, his eyes meeting hers with unflinching honesty. "I did not love her, but I was determined to honor my father's wishes." "What happened?" 2 weeks before the wedding, I discovered she had been conducting an affair with her cousin, a married man, throughout our engagement. When confronted, she admitted she had only accepted my proposal for my title and fortune. She had no intention of being faithful after our marriage. His voice was steady, but Sophia could see the old hurt beneath his composure. "I broke the engagement immediately. Her family was furious. They threatened scandal, demanded compensation. In the end, I paid a substantial sum to keep the matter quiet, not for my sake, but for hers. Despite everything, I did not wish to see her ruined." "That's why you've avoided marriage," Sophia realized. "Not just because of your mother's difficulties, but because you were betrayed." Ralph nodded slowly. "I convinced myself I was better off alone. That love was a risk not worth taking." A faint smile touched his lips. "Until you..." Relief flooded through Sophia. "Thank you for telling me the truth. I should have told you sooner," he admitted. "But I feared you might see parallels between my situation and yours with Norfolk, that you might think I approached you out of some misplaced sense of kinship in our shared humiliation." Sophia moved to sit beside him, taking his hand in hers. "Did you?" "No," he said firmly. "I approached you because I saw something extraordinary in you, a strength and dignity that fascinated me from the first moment. The rest, falling in love with you, that was entirely beyond my control. She smiled, squeezing his hand. As it should be. Ralph brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her gloved fingers. Norfolk told you this to create doubt between us. He's growing desperate. Yes, Sophia agreed. He seems unable to accept that I've moved on. Be careful around him, Ralph warned, his expression grave. I don't trust his motives. Promise me you won't meet with him alone. I promise, she said, though she wondered if his concern was perhaps excessive. Charles was many things, vain, selfish, inconsiderate, but surely not dangerous. It was a promise she would come to regret breaking. February brought bitter winds and heavy snows to London, driving society indoors to the warmth of drawing rooms and ballrooms. For Sophia and Ralph, the enforced intimacy of the winter season only deepened their connection. They established a comfortable routine: literary discussions at the Baskervilles on Tuesdays, musical evenings at Northumberland House on Fridays, and Sunday drives when weather permitted. Society had largely accepted their courtship, with most agreeing that the match made a certain sense. Both were intelligent, well-read, and shared similar values despite their different temperaments. Even Lord Baskerville, initially wary after the Norfolk fiasco, had grown genuinely fond of Ralph, appreciating his forthright nature and evident devotion to Sophia. He's nothing like Norfolk, Lord Baskerville remarked one evening as he and Sophia played chess in his study. No flash, no excessive charm, just substance. Sophia smiled as she moved her knight. That's precisely what draws me to him, father. With Ralph, there's no pretense. What you see is what you get. And what you get is a good man, her father said approvingly. Checkmate, my dear. Sophia laughed, conceding defeat. You've always been the superior strategist. Speaking of strategy, Lord Baskerville said, his tone growing serious as he reset the chess pieces, I received a letter from Norfolk today. Sophia's hand froze above the board. What did he want? To request a private meeting with me. He claims to have information that concerns our family's welfare. Lord Baskerville frowned. I declined, of course. Whatever game he's playing, I want no part of it. He's becoming increasingly persistent, Sophia said, troubled. Last week he sent flowers despite my returning his previous bouquets. Yesterday I received a letter which I burned unread. Perhaps we should inform Percy, her father suggested. Norfolk's behavior borders on harassment. No, Sophia said quickly. Ralph already dislikes Charles intensely. I fear what might happen if he knew the full extent of these attentions. Lord Baskerville studied his daughter with concern. You fear they might duel? Surely not. Such practices are falling out of favor. Not officially, perhaps, but you know as well as I do that men of their rank still occasionally settle matters privately. Sophia shook her head. I won't risk Ralph's safety. Charles will tire of this game eventually. Her father looked unconvinced, but did not press the matter. Very well, but promise me you'll be vigilant. Don't place yourself in situations where Norfolk might corner you alone. I promise, Sophia said, though a sense of unease settled in her stomach. Charles's persistence was beginning to feel less like wounded pride and more like obsession. The occasion of Lady Blackwood's charitable musicale the following week provided a rare opportunity for many of London's prominent families to gather despite the inclement weather. The event, held annually to raise funds for a foundling hospital, was considered one of the more worthwhile social obligations of the season. Sophia arrived with her father and Elizabeth, immediately searching the crowded drawing room for Ralph. She spotted him in conversation with several gentlemen near the pianoforte, his tall figure distinguishable even across the room. He looked up as she entered, their eyes meeting with the immediate connection that had become familiar, yet still thrilled her. He excused himself from his companions and made his way to her side. You look beautiful, he said simply, his admiration evident in his gaze. Sophia wore a gown of deep forest green that complemented her chestnut hair, which was arranged in an elegant chignon adorned with pearl pins, a gift from Ralph. Thank you, she replied, feeling the familiar flutter in her chest at his presence. How long have you been here? An hour or so. James insisted I come early to meet some political associates. He offered his arm. Lady Blackwood has arranged some exceptional talent tonight. The young violinist from Vienna is particularly impressive. As they made their way through the crowd, Sophia noticed Charles Norfolk across the room, deep in conversation with a striking blonde woman she recognized as Lady Helena Rutherford, a young widow known for her beauty and substantial fortune. Charles glanced up, meeting Sophia's gaze with a pointed look, before returning his attention to Lady Helena, bending closer to whisper something that made her laugh. "It seems Norfolk has found new interests," Ralph observed, following her gaze. "Good," Sophia said firmly. "Perhaps now he'll leave me in peace." The musicale began, and for the next hour, the assembled company was treated to performances by several accomplished musicians. During the intermission, Sophia excused herself to visit the ladies' retiring room, promising to meet Ralph by the refreshment table afterward. As she made her way down the hallway, a hand suddenly grasped her elbow, pulling her into a small antechamber. Charles Norfolk stood before her, closing the door partially behind them. "Forgive the dramatics," he said, releasing her arm, "but you've made it impossible to speak with you through conventional means." Sophia stepped back, putting distance between them. "There's a reason for that, Your Grace. I have nothing to say to you." Charles's handsome face hardened. "You haven't even heard what I came to tell you. Whatever it is, I'm not interested." Sophia moved toward the door, but Charles shifted to block her path. "It concerns Percy," he said, his voice dropping. "Information you should have before you commit yourself any further." Sophia hesitated, torn between caution and curiosity. "Say what you must, then let me pass." Charles's expression turned triumphant at having secured her attention. "Percy is not what he seems, Sophia. The story he told you about Lady Isabella Montague. A carefully constructed half-truth." "I don't believe you," Sophia said firmly, though a flicker of unease ran through her. "You should. I have it on good authority that Isabella broke the engagement, not Ralph. She discovered something about him, something that made her flee despite the scandal and financial ruin." Charles stepped closer. "Ask yourself why a man of his position, wealth and, yes, decent looks, remained unmarried all these years, why he avoided society. What is he hiding?" "Nothing that concerns you," came Ralph's deep voice from the doorway, his expression thunderous as he surveyed the scene before him. "Miss Baskerville, your father is looking for you." Charles smiled, unfazed by the interruption. "Perfect timing, Percy. We were just discussing you." "So I gathered," Ralph replied coldly. "Sophia, would you excuse us for a moment?" Alarmed by the tension crackling between the two men, Sophia moved to Ralph's side. "No. Whatever needs to be said can be said in my presence." "Very well." Ralph's gaze never left Charles's face. "Norfolk, your attentions to Miss Baskerville have become inappropriate. They will cease immediately." Charles's smile widened. "Or what, precisely? Will you challenge me to a duel, Percy? How medieval of you. Besides, I was merely providing information I thought Miss Baskerville should have before she makes a grave mistake." "The only mistake would be giving any credence to your insinuations," Ralph responded, his voice dangerously controlled. "Your wounded pride doesn't entitle you to harass Miss Baskerville or spread falsehoods about me." "Falsehoods? Interesting choice of word," Charles said silkily. "Perhaps Miss Baskerville should ask you about the real scandal involving your mother's family. Not her American origins, but what happened after she married your father." Ralph went very still. "Careful, Norfolk." "Why? Afraid the truth might emerge?" Charles's expression hardened. "How your mother's nervous condition required frequent rest cures at private asylums. How the servants were instructed never to leave her alone with sharp objects. The whispers that such instability often runs in families." Sophia gasped, looking at Ralph, whose face had gone pale with fury. "That's enough," she said sharply to Charles. "You've said quite enough." "Have I? I'm only concerned for your welfare, Sophia." Charles's voice dripped with false sincerity. "After all, Percy here might seem stable and reliable now, but what of the future? What might lurk beneath that controlled exterior? What might your children inherit?" Ralph moved so quickly that neither Sophia nor Charles had time to react. In an instant, he had Charles by the lapels, pushing him against the wall. "You will never speak of my mother again," Ralph said, his voice barely above a whisper, yet more frightening than if he had shouted. "You will never approach Miss Baskerville. You will leave London, or I swear, by everything I hold sacred, you will regret it." "Ralph," Sophia said urgently, touching his arm, "please, he's not worth it." For a moment she feared Ralph wouldn't release him. Then, with visible effort, he stepped back, straightening his coat. "My apologies, Sophia," he said quietly. "That was Unforgivable. Charles adjusted his clothing, a triumphant gleam in his eyes despite his physical disadvantage. As you can see, Miss Baskerville, the Duke of Northumberland has quite a temper beneath that cold exterior. Perhaps now you'll reconsider. Get out, Sophia interrupted, her voice shaking with anger. Get out before I call for the footman to remove you. Something in her expression must have convinced Charles that he had pushed too far. He bowed mockingly. As you wish. But remember my warnings when his true nature reveals itself. With that he departed, leaving Sophia and Ralph alone in the small antechamber. Ralph, Sophia began, reaching for his hand. What he said about your mother was partially true, Ralph admitted, his expression haunted. My mother did suffer from melancholia. After my birth it worsened. There were episodes, periods when she needed specialized care. Sophia squeezed his hand. That doesn't change anything between us. Doesn't it? He looked at her directly, his green eyes troubled. Norfolk was right about one thing. Such conditions can sometimes be inherited. It's one of the reasons I hesitated to pursue marriage. The fear that I might pass on such suffering. Ralph, Sophia said firmly, many people suffer from periods of melancholia without it defining their entire lives. Your mother was by all accounts a remarkable woman who raised an extraordinary son. Whatever difficulties she faced do not diminish that legacy, nor do they predict your future or that of our children. She blushed slightly at the implication, but held his gaze steadily. You truly believe that? He asked, vulnerability evident in his voice. I do. We all have shadows in our family histories, Ralph. What matters is how we face them, how we support each other through them. She smiled gently. Besides, I'm rather stubborn. If you ever showed signs of withdrawing into melancholy, I would simply have to drag you back to the light. A hint of a smile touched his lips. You would, wouldn't you? Without hesitation, she promised. Now, shall we return to the musicale before my father sends out a search party? Ralph hesitated. There's something I need to ask you first, Sophia. Something I've been considering for some time, though I had planned a more romantic setting. Her heart quickened as he took both her hands in his. Yes? These past months have been the happiest of my life. You've brought joy, warmth and purpose where there was only duty and solitude. His voice was steady, though she could feel a slight tremor in his hands. I love you more than I ever thought possible to love another person. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? Tears of happiness sprang to Sophia's eyes. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Ralph, I will marry you. He drew her gently into his arms, their lips meeting in a kiss that, while modest by modern standards, sealed their commitment to one another with tender promise. When they finally returned to the musicale, the glow of happiness surrounding them was unmistakable. Lord Baskerville, seeing their joined hands and radiant expressions, raised an eyebrow inquiringly. At Ralph's nod, a smile of genuine pleasure spread across his face. Elizabeth, ever observant, immediately embraced Sophia, whispering congratulations. Lady Eleanor, who had been in conversation with Lord Blackwood, made her way across the room with surprising speed for a woman of her years. Well, she demanded, looking between them, has my nephew finally found the courage to propose properly? Ralph laughed, a sound of pure joy that drew smiles from those nearby. I have, Aunt Eleanor, and miracle of miracles, Miss Baskerville has accepted. Of course she has, Lady Eleanor declared, embracing Sophia warmly. The girl has excellent judgment. The news spread quickly through the gathering, with well-wishers surrounding the newly engaged couple. Only one face showed displeasure. Charles Norfolk watched from across the room, his expression darkening as he observed the evident happiness of the woman he had once abandoned. The weeks following their engagement were filled with preparations and celebrations. Announcements were placed in the newspapers, congratulations poured in from friends and relations, and Sophia found herself swept up in the excitement of planning a spring wedding. This time, however, the preparations felt different. Where her engagement to Charles had been marked by grand gestures and public displays, her relationship with Ralph was characterized by quiet certainty and mutual respect. They made decisions together, from the selection of Northumberland House's East Wing as their future apartments, to the charitable donations they would make in lieu of elaborate wedding favors. One afternoon in early March, As they walked through the gardens of Kew, where the first crocuses were beginning to emerge, Ralph broached a subject that had clearly been on his mind. "Sophia," he began, "there's something I wish to discuss with you regarding our future." She smiled up at him. "That sounds rather serious." "It is, in a way." He guided her to a stone bench overlooking a small pond. "You know that as Duchess of Northumberland, you'll have considerable responsibilities, social obligations, charitable work, management of multiple households." "I'm not intimidated by hard work, Ralph," she assured him. "I know you're not. That's not my concern." He took her hands in his. "What I want to be sure of is that you'll have space for your own interests and pursuits as well. Your writing, for instance." Sophia blinked in surprise. Few people knew of her private passion for writing poetry and essays, which she had shared only with Elizabeth and, more recently, with Ralph. "You would encourage that?" she asked. "More than encourage. I insist upon it," he said with a smile. "You have a remarkable mind, Sophia. I would never want marriage to me to diminish your intellectual life or personal growth." Tears pricked at her eyes. "Do you know how unusual that perspective is among men of your station?" "Perhaps," he acknowledged, "but I've seen what happens when a woman's spirit is constrained by convention and expectation. My mother was happiest when my father encouraged her painting. After she became ill, art was often her only solace." Sophia squeezed his hands. "Thank you, for understanding, for caring about what matters to me." "Always," he promised. "I want us to be partners in the truest sense, supporting each other's ambitions and interests, facing challenges together." As they continued their walk, discussing plans for a small library that would be Sophia's private writing retreat within Northumberland House, neither noticed the figure watching them from a distance, his face twisted with bitter resentment. Charles Norfolk had spent the weeks since the musical alternating between pursuing Lady Helena Rutherford in public and privately plotting ways to disrupt Sophia's happiness. The woman he had once abandoned had become an obsession, not because he truly loved her, but because her evident happiness with Ralph Percy was a constant reminder of his own miscalculation. He had expected her to pine for him, to welcome him back with gratitude when he deigned to return. Instead, she had rebuilt her life without him, found love with a man he considered his inferior in charm and social grace, and now glowed with a contentment he had never seen during their courtship. It was intolerable. His attempts to sow doubt about Ralph's family history and mental stability had failed. His efforts to intercept their correspondence had been thwarted by vigilant servants. Even his carefully placed rumors about Ralph's supposed financial difficulties had gained no traction, given the well-known prosperity of the Percy estates. As he watched the couple from a distance, a new plan began to form, one that would require patience, but might prove more effective than his previous attempts. If he could not prevent the marriage, perhaps he could plant seeds of discord that would bloom into resentment over time. With a final glare at the oblivious couple, Charles turned and strode away, his mind working on the details of his scheme. The week before the wedding was a whirlwind of final preparations. Sophia divided her time between fittings for her wedding gown, consultations with the housekeeper at Northumberland House about her preferences for their private apartments, and treasured quiet moments with Ralph when they could steal them. They had decided on a ceremony at St. George's, a deliberate choice that Sophia had insisted upon. "I want to replace the memory of that day with a happier one," she had explained, when Ralph questioned whether the location might bring painful associations. "I want to walk down that aisle toward a future I've chosen with my whole heart." 3 days before the wedding, Sophia was reviewing the final guest list with Elizabeth when a footman announced an unexpected visitor. "Lady Helena Rutherford, miss." Sophia and Elizabeth exchanged puzzled glances. While they were acquainted with the young widow, they were hardly intimate friends. "Show her in," Sophia instructed, curious about this unusual call. Lady Helena entered, elegant in a visiting dress of pale lavender, her golden hair arranged in fashionable ringlets beneath a feathered bonnet. Though her expression was composed, Sophia detected a certain tension in her manner. "Lady Helena, what a pleasant surprise," Sophia greeted her. "May I present my friend, Miss Elizabeth Caldwell, Elizabeth Lady Helena Rutherford." After the customary courtesies were exchanged and tea was served, Lady Helena came to the purpose of her visit. "Miss Baskerville, I find myself in the uncomfortable position of being the bearer of potentially distressing information," she began, her gloved fingers fidgeting with her teacup. Under normal circumstances, I would not interfere in another's affairs, but given your impending marriage, I felt it my moral duty to speak. Sophia's pleasant expression didn't waver, though internally she braced herself. What information is that, Lady Helena? It concerns the Duke of Norfolk. Lady Helena hesitated. He has been attentive to me these past weeks. I initially found his interest flattering, but gradually realized his attention was not entirely sincere. I'm sorry to hear that, Sophia said carefully, but I fail to see how this concerns me. My connection with the Duke ended some time ago. Yes, but that is precisely the issue. Lady Helena leaned forward, lowering her voice, though only Elizabeth was present to overhear. In an unguarded moment, after perhaps too much champagne at Lady Harewood's supper, he confessed that his pursuit of me was largely motivated by a desire to make you jealous. He spoke of you in a manner I found disturbing, possessive, obsessive even. Elizabeth's eyes widened, but Sophia maintained her composure. I appreciate your concern, Lady Helena, but Charles Norfolk's feelings are of no consequence to me now. There's more, Lady Helena continued, clearly uncomfortable but determined. He spoke of plans to disrupt your wedding to the Duke of Northumberland. He was not specific, but the intensity of his animosity toward your Grace's fiancé was alarming. Now Sophia's calm facade cracked slightly. He threatened Ralph? Not explicitly, Lady Helena clarified, but he made comments about saving you from a terrible mistake and revealing Percy's true nature before it was too late. I feared he might cause a scene at the ceremony or worse. Sophia exchanged a troubled glance with Elizabeth. Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Lady Helena. It was most courageous of you. I owed it to you as a fellow woman, Lady Helena replied, rising to take her leave. The Duke can be very charming when he wishes, but there is something unbalanced in his fixation on you. Please be careful and perhaps alert your fiancé to the potential for disruption. After Lady Helena departed, Elizabeth turned to Sophia, her expression grave. You must tell Ralph immediately. If Norfolk is planning something, and cause a confrontation days before our wedding, Sophia shook her head. No, I'll inform my father and ensure that the church security is increased. Charles may be behaving irrationally, but he's not foolish enough to create a public scandal that would damage his own reputation. Elizabeth looked unconvinced. Sophia, you've always been too willing to see the best in people. Norfolk has already demonstrated he's capable of shocking behavior. Who abandons a bride at the altar? I know, Sophia sighed, but I truly believe he's more interested in unsettling me than causing actual harm. His pride was wounded when I didn't welcome him back with open arms. Once Ralph and I are married, he'll have to accept the reality and move on. Elizabeth reluctantly agreed not to mention Lady Helena's warning to Ralph, though she insisted on informing Lord Baskerville. He, in turn, arranged for additional footmen to be present at the church, a precaution that would prove both necessary and insufficient. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, a perfect early spring day with blossoms beginning to appear on the trees lining Berkeley Square. Unlike the nervous anticipation that had preceded her almost wedding to Charles, Sophia felt a calm certainty as her maid helped her dress for the ceremony. Her gown was a masterpiece of restrained elegance, ivory silk with delicate embroidery of lilies of the valley along the hem and bodice, a tribute to Ralph's first gift to her. Her veil, secured with the pearl pins he had given her, fell in soft folds around her face and shoulders. You look like an angel, Miss Sophia, her maid whispered, stepping back to admire her handiwork. Elizabeth, serving as her bridesmaid, entered the room and gasped in delight. Oh, Sophia, Ralph will be speechless. As the carriage carried them toward St. George's, Sophia's thoughts turned to the journey that had brought her here. From the devastation of that terrible day last autumn to the profound happiness she now felt, she had emerged stronger, wiser, more certain of herself and what she truly wanted in a partner. The church was filled with guests, the murmur of their conversations audible as Sophia waited in the antechamber with her father. This time there was no anxious checking of timepieces, no worried whispers about the groom's whereabouts. Through a small window, Sophia could see Ralph already waiting at the altar, tall and distinguished in his formal attire, James Blackwood at his side as best man. "Ready, my dear?" Lord Baskerville asked, offering his arm with a proud smile. "More than ready, father," Sophia replied, her heart full. The familiar notes of the wedding march began, and they started their procession down the aisle. Unlike her previous journey to the altar, Sophia kept her gaze fixed on Ralph, whose expression as he watched her approach was one of undisguised love and wonder. They reached the altar, and Lord Baskerville placed Sophia's hand in Ralph's, a gesture that symbolized not only the giving of a bride, but the entrusting of his beloved daughter to a man he had come to respect deeply. The vicar began the service, his voice solemn yet warm as he spoke the ancient words. When the time came for any objections to the union, a momentary hush fell over the congregation. It was in that silence that the church doors burst open with a bang that echoed through the nave. Charles Norfolk stood in the doorway, his appearance dishevelled, his eyes wild. "Stop this farce!" he shouted, his voice echoing through the stunned silence of the church. Ralph instinctively moved closer to Sophia, his body slightly in front of hers as if to shield her. Lord Baskerville rose from his seat in the front pew, his expression thunderous. "This woman," Charles continued, staggering slightly as he moved down the aisle, "cannot marry this man. She is promised to me." Whispers rippled through the congregation as footmen moved to intercept Charles, who evaded them with surprising agility. "Norfolk," Ralph said, his voice low but carrying in the hushed church, "you are not welcome here. Leave now while you still have some dignity intact." Charles laughed, a bitter sound devoid of humor. "Dignity? You speak to me of dignity, Percy? When you stole what was rightfully mine?" "I never belonged to you, Charles," Sophia said firmly, stepping forward despite Ralph's protective gesture. "I made my choice freely, both when I accepted your proposal and when I ended our connection after your abandonment." "Abandonment?" Charles's face contorted with a mixture of rage and something like desperation. "Is that what you call it? I was protecting you." Lord Baskerville had reached them now, positioning himself between the couple and the intruder. "That's quite enough, Norfolk. You're clearly not in your right mind. Allow my men to escort you out before this becomes an even greater embarrassment for you." Two footmen flanked Charles, but he shook them off violently. "You don't understand," he insisted, his gaze fixed on Sophia. "I had to test you, to be sure you truly loved me enough to forgive anything, don't you see? It was a test of your devotion." A collective gasp went through the assembly at this shocking revelation. Sophia felt Ralph tense beside her, but she placed a restraining hand on his arm. "A test," she repeated, her voice steady despite her shock. "You shattered my heart and humiliated me publicly as a test." "Yes," Charles exclaimed, as if this explanation made perfect sense. "A duchess must be steadfast, unshakable in her loyalty. When I returned, you should have welcomed me back. Instead, you turned to him." He gestured contemptuously toward Ralph. Sophia stared at the man she had once thought she loved, seeing him truly for perhaps the first time. Not the charming, dashing suitor who had swept her off her feet, but a deeply insecure, controlling man whose handsome exterior masked a twisted soul. "Charles," she said quietly, "you need help. This behavior is not rational. Please, allow Lord Blackwood to take you home before you cause yourself further embarrassment." James Blackwood had indeed stepped forward, his expression a mixture of pity and disgust as he addressed his former friend. "Come, Norfolk, this has gone far enough." For a moment it seemed Charles might allow himself to be led away. Then his gaze fell on Ralph's hand, still protectively holding Sophia's, and something in him snapped. "No!" he shouted. "I won't let you have her." With alarming speed, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small pistol. Screams erupted from the congregation as women fainted and men moved to shield them. Ralph immediately pushed Sophia behind him, facing Charles squarely despite the weapon trained on him. "Norfolk, think about what you're doing," Ralph said calmly, though Sophia could feel the tension in every line of his body. "This isn't just a scandal anymore. It's a crime." "A crime?" Charles laughed wildly. "What about the crime of stealing another man's fiancée? What about the crime of poisoning her mind against me?" "No one poisoned my mind, Charles," Sophia said, stepping out from behind Ralph, despite his attempt to keep her protected. "Your own actions revealed your true character." "Stay back, Sophia," Ralph warned, trying to move her behind him again, but Sophia stood firm, facing the man who had caused her so much pain. "Put down the pistol, Charles. This isn't who you are. This isn't the man who quoted poetry to me in Lady Fleming's garden, who discussed politics with my father, who danced with such grace at the midwinter ball. For a heartbeat, Uncertainty flickered across Charles's face. The pistol wavered slightly. "Remember who you are," Sophia continued gently. "The Duke of Norfolk, a gentleman, a man of honor. This," she gestured to the pistol, "this is beneath you." The church was utterly silent, all eyes fixed on the tableau at the altar. Charles with his weapon, Sophia speaking with quiet dignity, Ralph tense and ready to intervene at the slightest provocation. Slowly, painfully, something like awareness returned to Charles's eyes. He looked at the pistol in his hand as if seeing it for the first time, then at the shocked faces of the assembled guests, many of whom had known him since childhood. "What have I become?" he whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. In that moment of clarity, James Blackwood moved forward and gently took the pistol from Charles's unresisting hand. Lord Baskerville signalled to the footman, who stepped forward to escort Charles from the church. As they led him away, Charles looked back once at Sophia. The wild rage had left his face, replaced by a hollow emptiness that was somehow more disturbing. "I truly did love you," he said softly, "in my own way." "I know," Sophia replied with genuine compassion. "Goodbye, Charles." The doors closed behind them, and a collective exhalation seemed to pass through the church. Ralph turned to Sophia, his eyes searching her face with concern. "Are you all right?" he asked urgently, taking her hands in his. "Yes," she assured him, her voice steady. "I'm perfectly all right." The vicar, who had remained remarkably composed throughout the ordeal, cleared his throat. "Shall we proceed with the ceremony?" Ralph looked to Sophia, leaving the decision entirely in her hands. She smiled at him, her eyes clear and certain. "Yes," she said firmly, "let us proceed." The remainder of the ceremony passed in a blur of emotion for Sophia. The traditional words took on deeper meaning after the dramatic demonstration of how fragile life and happiness could be. When Ralph placed the simple gold band on her finger, his hands were steady, his voice unwavering as he promised to love, honor, and cherish her all the days of his life. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the vicar declared at last. "Your Grace, you may kiss your bride." Ralph cupped Sophia's face with infinite tenderness, his eyes conveying all the love and commitment words could never adequately express. Their kiss, while appropriately modest for the setting, sealed a bond that had been forged through adversity and strengthened by mutual respect and genuine love. As they turned to face the congregation, now husband and wife, the applause that erupted was more than the customary polite acknowledgement. It was a celebration of triumph, of love and dignity prevailing over bitterness and obsession. The wedding breakfast at Northumberland House was a surprisingly joyful affair, despite the drama that had preceded it. Perhaps the shared experience of the disrupted ceremony had created a sense of communal relief and celebration among the guests. Whatever the reason, the elegant reception rooms rang with laughter and conversation as friends and family toasted the new Duke and Duchess. Lady Eleanor, holding court from her favourite armchair near the fire, beckoned the couple over during a brief lull in the festivities. "Well," she declared, her eyes twinkling with mischief, "you certainly know how to make an impression, my dears. I haven't attended such an exciting wedding since Lady Caroline Ponsonby married William Lamb back in '05. Ralph laughed, the tension of the morning finally easing from his shoulders. "I would have preferred a bit less excitement, Aunt Eleanor." "Nonsense. Nobody will forget this day in a hurry." She patted Sophia's hand affectionately. "You handled yourself beautifully, my dear, showed true courage and compassion. The Percy family is fortunate to welcome such a woman." "Thank you, Lady Eleanor," Sophia replied warmly, "though I believe I'm the fortunate one." As the celebration continued around them, Ralph drew Sophia into a quiet alcove overlooking the gardens where the first daffodils were beginning to bloom. "I need to tell you something," he said, taking both her hands in his. "When Norfolk pulled that pistol, I've never been more terrified in my life, not for myself, but for you. The thought of losing you." He shook his head, unable to complete the sentence. "You didn't lose me," Sophia said softly. "You won't lose me." "I know." He brought her hands to his lips, pressing a kiss to her fingers. "But it made me realize how precious this is, what we've found together. I promise you, Sophia, I will spend every day of our lives cherishing this gift." "As will I," she whispered, her heart full to bursting, "every single day." From across the room, Elizabeth watched her friend's happiness with satisfaction. Beside her, Lord James Blackwood sipped his champagne thoughtfully. "A dramatic beginning to their marriage," he observed. "But the right beginning," Elizabeth replied. "They've already weathered a storm together. That bodes well for their future, I think." "Indeed," James hesitated, then added, "I've arranged for Norfolk to be taken to his estate in Yorkshire. His mother will join him there. The family physician believes he's suffering from a nervous affliction brought on by excessive drinking and, perhaps, an unbalanced mind." Elizabeth nodded soberly. "It's for the best. I hope he finds peace there, away from society and temptation. As do I." James glanced at her profile, admiring her compassion even for a man who had caused her dear friend such pain. "Miss Caldwell, might I be bold enough to request your company for a drive in the park tomorrow afternoon? The weather promises to be fine." A faint blush coloured Elizabeth's cheeks. "I would be delighted, Lord Blackwood." Across the room, Lord Baskerville observed all these interactions with quiet satisfaction. Though he would miss his daughter terribly, he could not have wished for a better match for her than Ralph Percy, a man who valued her mind as well as her beauty, who treated her as an equal partner rather than a possession. As the afternoon waned and the time approached for the newlyweds to depart for Percy's country estate in Northumberland, where they would spend their honeymoon, Sophia sought out her father for a private moment. "Are you happy, father?" she asked as they stood together in his familiar study, where she had spent so many hours reading by the fire while he worked at his desk. "The question, my dear," he replied, his eyes misty with emotion, "is whether you are happy." Sophia smiled, her face radiant with joy. "Happier than I ever imagined possible. Ralph is everything I could wish for in a husband. Kind, intelligent, honourable, and he loves me for myself, not for some idealized version of me. Then I too am happy." He embraced her warmly. "Your mother would be so proud of the woman you've become, Sophia. As am I." The journey north to Alnwick Castle, the Percy family's ancestral seat in Northumberland, took several days by private carriage. As they travelled farther from London, Sophia felt the last of the tension from recent events melting away, replaced by a growing excitement about the future that awaited her. Ralph proved to be an attentive and considerate husband, ensuring her comfort at each posting inn where they stopped for the night, engaging her in thoughtful conversation about books and ideas during the long hours on the road, and sharing stories of his childhood visits to the castle that would now be their summer residence. "It's quite different from London," he warned, as they neared their destination on the fourth day. "Wilder, more rugged. The winds off the North Sea can be fierce, and the local people speak with an accent you might find challenging at first." "It sounds wonderful," Sophia said sincerely. "I've always loved wild places. My father took me to the Lake District once when I was a girl, and I've never forgotten the majesty of those mountains and lakes." Ralph smiled, relieved by her enthusiasm. "There's something liberating about being away from the constraints of London society, isn't there? Here we can truly be ourselves." "Is that why you spent so much time here after what happened with Lady Isabella?" Sophia asked hesitantly. Though they had discussed his broken engagement before, there had been little opportunity for deeper conversation about its impact on him. Ralph nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, in part. After the scandal, muted though it was by the settlement, I found London suffocating. Here, among people who had known my family for generations, I could breathe again." He took her hand, his expression earnest. "But Sophia, I want you to know, what I felt for Isabella was nothing compared to what I feel for you. She was a match arranged by my father, someone I was prepared to respect and treat honourably, but never someone who touched my heart." "And I?" Sophia asked, a smile playing at her lips. "You," Ralph said, bringing her hand to his heart, "have thoroughly captured my heart, my mind and my soul. You are my partner in every sense, the woman I've waited for all my life without even realizing I was waiting." Their carriage crested a hill, and suddenly Alnwick Castle came into view, a magnificent medieval fortress rising majestically above the surrounding countryside, its stone walls golden in the late afternoon sun. "Oh, Ralph," Sophia breathed, awestruck by the sight. "It's like something from a fairy tale." "Welcome home, Duchess," he said softly, his eyes warm with love. As the carriage approached the castle, servants lined the driveway to welcome their Duke and his new bride. The housekeeper, Mrs. Harrison, who had known Ralph since he was a boy, stepped forward to greet them as they alighted. "Your Grace, welcome back," she said warmly, curtsying to Ralph before turning to Sophia with genuine warmth. "And welcome to you, Your Grace. All is prepared as you requested." The next hours were a whirlwind of introductions, as Sophia met the principal servants and was shown through the main rooms of the castle. Though the building was ancient, dating back to the Norman conquest, the interior had been modernized over the centuries, while retaining its historical character. "This will be your private sitting room," Ralph explained as they entered a lovely rounded chamber in one of the towers, filled with afternoon sunlight. A writing desk was positioned near the window with a magnificent view of the countryside, and bookshelves lined the walls. "I had it arranged according to your preferences. Elizabeth was most helpful in advising on your favorite colors and furniture styles." Touched by his thoughtfulness, Sophia explored the room, noting the fresh flowers on every surface and the selection of her favorite books already arranged on the shelves. "It's perfect," she said, turning to him with shining eyes. "Absolutely perfect." As evening fell, they dined privately in a small chamber adjacent to their suite. The local cook had prepared regional specialties to introduce Sophia to Northumbrian cuisine: freshly caught fish from the North Sea, lamb from the hillsides, and vegetables from the castle's own gardens. Over candlelight, they talked of their plans for the future, the improvements Ralph hoped to make to the tenant farms, Sophia's ideas for establishing a school for the workers' children, their shared dream of creating a home filled with books, music, and eventually children of their own. "Are you afraid?" Ralph asked quietly, as they touched on the subject of family. "After what I told you about my mother?" Sophia considered her answer carefully. "Not afraid, no. Aware perhaps of the possibilities. But Ralph, every family carries its own burdens and blessings. If our children inherit your intelligence, your sense of justice, your capacity for love, those gifts far outweigh any risks." He reached across the table to take her hand. "How did I become so fortunate to find a woman of such wisdom and grace?" "I believe," she said with a smile, "that we found each other precisely when we needed to. After I thought all my dreams had shattered, you showed me that sometimes what looks like an ending is merely the beginning of something far more beautiful than we could have imagined." Later that night, as they stood together at the window of their bedchamber, looking out at the star-filled sky above the ancient landscape, Ralph wrapped his arms around Sophia from behind, holding her close. "Are you happy, my love?" he murmured against her hair. Sophia turned in his embrace, lifting her face to his. "Completely, utterly happy," she whispered. "This is where I belong, with you." Their lips met in a kiss that held all the promise of their future together, a future built not on the shifting sands of infatuation and societal expectations, but on the solid foundation of genuine love, mutual respect, and shared values. In that moment, all the pain of the past, Charles's betrayal, the public humiliation, the months of rebuilding her shattered confidence, seemed a small price to pay for the joy she had found. Like a phoenix rising from the ashes, Sophia had emerged from her darkest hour to find a love far truer and deeper than anything she had known before. As Ralph led her to their marriage bed, she silently thanked whatever twist of fate had brought them together, the most unexpected blessing born from what had once seemed an unbearable tragedy. In the years to come, their love would only deepen as they faced life's inevitable challenges and celebrated its many joys together. The scandal that had once defined Sophia in London society's eyes would fade to a distant memory, overshadowed by her reputation as a respected duchess, a passionate advocate for education, and Ralph's beloved partner in all things. And when 2 years later, they welcomed their first child, a daughter with Ralph's green eyes and Sophia's chestnut hair, the circle of love that had begun in the aftermath of heartbreak would widen to embrace a new generation, proving once again that sometimes the most beautiful chapters of our lives begin when we have the courage to turn the page on disappointment and open our hearts to unexpected joy. The end. Dear listener, the clock ticks past midnight as you've journeyed with Sophia from abandonment to triumph. I wonder, did you recognize something of yourself in her story? Not in the grand mansions or titled suitors, perhaps, but in that moment when she chose to walk back into St. George's Church, deliberately reclaiming the very place of her humiliation, That's the courage of the oak that has weathered 60 winters. We talk so much about the wisdom of aging, but rarely about its rebellious spirit, the quiet defiance that comes with having seen enough of life to discard others' expectations. Like Sophia, refusing the pastels expected of young ladies and choosing bold sapphire blue instead. When did you last give yourself permission to wear your own version of sapphire blue? To reclaim spaces that once hurt you? To say no to performances that drain your precious remaining years? Ralph Percy understood something many never learn, that love isn't about rescuing someone but recognizing them, not the manufactured version society demands, but the authentic soul beneath. He saw Sophia's intellect as an asset, not a liability, her previous heartbreak as depth, not damage. Tonight, as your head rests upon your pillow, consider this radical thought. What if the losses you've weathered, or the disappointments you've survived, haven't diminished your value, but transformed you into someone magnificent? Not despite these experiences, but because of them. The young worry about making mistakes. At your age, perhaps you've discovered the liberating truth that most mistakes aren't fatal. They're simply doorways to unexpected gardens. Your heart has beaten more than 2 billion times to keep you here, reading these words. That alone is a miracle worthy of celebration. Not just survival, but presence. The extraordinary gift of continuing to write new chapters when society expects only epilogues. May your dreams tonight be as bold as Sophia's burgundy gown at the midwinter ball, unapologetically vivid, refreshingly authentic, and entirely yours. With humble gratitude for your seasoned spirit. Legends of the Fall Team. Thank you so much for staying with us until the end. We hope this story of courage, love, and unexpected redemption touched your heart as deeply as it touched ours. If it moved you, please like, comment, and share it with someone who needs a little hope today. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel from the bottom of our hearts so we can keep bringing you more stories full of emotion, romance, and life-changing turns. At the very end of this video, another story suggestion will appear. Click and be surprised by another deeply emotional tale from our channel. With love, the Legends of the Fall Team.